With the recession of censorship, this information that was typically taboo about power and Zionism has been able to come into the forefront. And since this information has been able to come to the forefront, people are getting woken up. He didn't write this letter to Netanyahu out of anywhere. There's multiple things going on. Charlie Kirk, running the biggest youth conservative movement in America, is being pulled on one side that he's not defending Israel enough and being called an anti-Semite for platforming and allowing discourse and debate, but he's also being attacked by his constituents for being an Israel shill. And since Charlie's on the front lines fighting this fight, obviously it's going to affect him a lot harder than Benjamin Netanyahu. So Charlie wrote this letter to kind of wake up the Israeli government that, look guys, I'm here. You guys don't got the youth. This is code red. The letter Charlie Kirk sent to Netanyahu in May advised the Israeli leader on how to counter anti-Israel sentiment among Gen Z and the information war being waged against the Jewish state. In the letter, Kirk stressed that Israel needs a communications intervention with the American public, stating that dwindling support for the Holy Land pains him to see. To combat rising anti-Semitism among the youth, Kirk urged Netanyahu to create an Israel Truth Network staffed by young people to convey that Israel is a great friend of America to Gen Z Americans, to bring Israeli-held hostages in Gaza on a speaking tour across the country, to conduct on-the-street interviews with Israeli minority groups entitled, "Dude, you got us wrong," and to have more of Netanyahu's own clips translated from Hebrew into English. Kirk also suggested Israel could do more for America, such as offering hurricane aid with the Star of David on it in order to boost American political and military support, pleading with Netanyahu to stop subcontracting Hezbollah efforts to American surrogates. Kirk also pledged to push the propaganda to his young audience, identifying himself as a defender of the Judeo-Christian civilization. Kirk assured Netanyahu of his unwavering pro-Israel stance and insisted that his concerns came from a place of love for Israel and the Jewish people. So what does this letter address? Well, this letter, guys, kind of addresses two different things. Number one, Charlie was aware of and understanding that his audience was starting to grow more and more disdain for Israel. And he also understood that Israel is losing the information war, right? Now, I know a lot of people think that Israel, killed Charlie, but as of a few months ago, he was writing to the PM about Israel fixing its image. Let's go ahead and get into this. Okay. Dear Prime Minister, one of my greatest joys as a Christian is advocating for Israel and forming alliances with in the fight to protect Judeo-Christian civilization. Most recently, I'm proud to have taken over Ambassador Huckabee's show on TBN, where we continually support Israel and the Jewish people. As Mohammedanism spreads into Western societies, it is critical that Christians stay united in the effort to contain and roll back radical Islam and Sharia law. I regret to report that anti-Israel and anti-Semitic trends are at record levels on social media. These negative sentiments then flow downstream into college campuses and even seep into the conservative MAGA community. My team and I have spent months analyzing these trends and debating ideas that can help you and your country push back against these disturbing developments. Anti-Israel sentiment can undermine American support for Israel. The purpose of this letter is to lay out our concerns and outline potential remedies. Everything written here is from a place of deep love for Israel and the Jewish people. I think it's important to be brutally honest with those you love. In my opinion, Israel is losing the information war and needs a communication intervention. I started to compose this letter to you on Easter. I should have been focused on my family, but I was getting bombarded with messages about the Israeli army making it difficult for Christians to access church in Jerusalem on Easter. At the time, I did not see any official statements pushing back on this narrative. It was frustrating because pro-Israel surrogates like me should not be in charge of fact-checking every piece of anti-Israel information that pours into social media. It wasn't just Easter. On my recent campus tours, half the questions I get are about Israel, and they're all negative. I often spend half my time on these campus tours defending in Israel, which I'm proud to do because I love Israel and love the Jewish faith. I spent endless hours with Dennis Prager over the years studying the Torah. Sometimes it feels like I'm defending Israel in public more than your own government. My experience on college campuses matches a recent Harvard-Harris poll, which reported 48% of 18 to 24-year-old Americans support Hamas over Israel. Even in young MAGA circles, Israel is losing support. We are getting huge crowds of 4,000 to 5,000 students on some of my college tours. My campus visits are becoming like a rock concert atmosphere full of conservative patriots. Yet, on these campus visits, I'm constantly confronted with, quote, Israel is an apartheid state. Why does Israel conduct ethnic cleansing? Why is America subsidizing Israel's genocide against the Palestinian people? Is American aid helping to subsidize Israel's free health care? Israel and are running U.S. foreign policy. Israel is responsible for defending Israel is not in our U.S. national interest. Why is Israel trying to drag us into a war in the Middle East? Pretty base students, huh? Above are just a sampling of the negative Israel-Jewish comments and questions I confront on college campuses. I'm accused of being a paid apologist for Israel when I defend her. However, if I don't defend Israel strongly enough, I'm accused of being anti-Semitic. I know you've got a seven-front war and my kvetching pales in comparison. But I'm trying to convey to you that Israel is losing support even in conservative circles. This should be a 5-alarm fire. I'm often asked, why is Israel killing so many innocent civilians in Gaza? I know Israel goes to great lengths by dropping flyers and even calling civilians to clear out of areas about to be bombed. I know Israel posts maps showing which areas should be evacuated. I know that Hamas uses civilians as human shields. But 90% of the younger generations get their news from social media and the podcast, and there is very little pushback or fact-checking by Israeli government and or pro-Israel supporters in the media, especially social media. I strongly suggest Israel not always depend on subcontracting the information war efforts to surrogates in America. Mr. Prime Minister, I urge you to revamp, in all caps, your information warfare strategy from top to bottom. Sometimes the impression is given that Israel thinks everyone hates them, so why care about winning over hearts and minds? If there's any truth to this impression, I urge you to consider that social media and podcasts is where you fight for the hearts and minds of the younger generation. Obviously, all this negative Israel propaganda on social media easily translates into pro-Hamas, free Palestine sentiment on many college campuses. Here are some of the unsolicited recommendations my team and I suggest if you're open-minded to a communications reset. 1. For starters, you need a rapid response media team. President Trump does this very effectively on social media with his own account and his White House Rapid Response 47 team. The president has strong fighters like Stephen Miller and Caroline Leavitt who battle the press every day. Honestly, I don't even know if you have a press secretary. You're an eloquent defender of Israel, but you need a team of information warriors out there pushing back every day in real time. When you don't push back, anti-Semitism and anti-Israel propaganda fill the void. A pro-Israel friend recently asked me, do Israelis even care how the world perceives their country? 2. I strongly recommend putting together a team of pro-Israel experts who can fact-check misinformation in real time from Israel. Israel needs to take the lead in this effort. No more dependence on subcontractors. Israel never asks for American troops because Israel does its own fighting. I suggest the same approach for the information war. You lead, and people like me will follow and provide supplemental support. If you're open to revamping your communication strategy, my team and I are happy to assist. 3. You need something perhaps like an Israel Truth Network, ITN, which can include social media companies and one-stop source of information website where, for example, all the negative Israeli questions I get can be thoroughly debunked. I would love to refer students to such a website. This website could also be a conduit to groups like Hillel and Jewish educators like Dennis Prager. There can be links to books, podcasts, media personalities, and pro-Israel thought leaders. The website can be a place where Judeo-Christian leaders and groups can share information and form a closer alliance in the fight against Islamic fundamentalism. ITN social media can post pro-Israel, pro-Judeo-Christian video clips, breaking news, and articles. ITN could potentially be a news aggregation site for all news pertaining to Israel and Judeo-Christian efforts to preserve Western civilization. 4. Have you considered inviting some of the released hostages to go on a speaking tour in the U.S.? This can be very effective messaging. These hostages can talk about how Gazan civilians not once offered any empathy or compassion. President Trump referenced this lack of humanity when some released hostages visited the Oval Office. This was effective messaging. When impactful messaging clicks, keep it going. Also, these hostages and all your spokespersons should be arguing it's Hamas that is committing genocide on their own people by using civilians as human shields and storing weapons in schools, hospitals, etc. That information drips out the regular media but is almost non-existent on social media. Maybe interview regular Israelis on the streets asking them what they love about their country. Interview Israeli Arabs, Druze, Orthodox, secular, etc. Ask Israelis what do they wish the world knew about Israel. Ask them to respond to examples of misinformation on social media. This can be an entire social media PR campaign called Dude, You Got Us Wrong. Interview Israelis from all walks of life. Let Israelis explain in their own words how Israel is a pluralistic society. A free country with elected leaders unlike all the surrounding authoritarian Arab nations. Why not show how your hospitals take care of wounded terrorists? Why not show clips of Israel dropping flyers from airplanes warning Gazan civilians to get out of harm's way? It would have been nice to see an Israeli plane with the Star of David arrive in the U.S. full of supplies after a hurricane. Has Israel offered any assistance to the U.S. insofar as technology to protect our border with the missile defense shield President Trump has discussed? These are examples of effective messaging showing Israel as a close ally of America. Consumers of social media are aware of the billions in supplies we send to Israel, but they're less aware of what America gets in return. You and your team need to make the argument on social media that Israel is a great friend of America and is vital to U.S. national security. Israel needs to better portray itself as a member of Team Humanity. Israel needs to establish baseline to our identity, Through an effective messaging campaign, you need a clear, defined message. This message should be homegrown from Israel. In other words, create original content from Israel, videos and visuals, feed social media. Keep these edit clips short, under 1 minute, and post the best ones on Israel Truth Network. Don't rely on non-Israeli social media influencers to create all these clips. Create them yourselves, and influencers like me can promote this original work and refer people to your social media and websites. Be proactive, take the lead. Bottom line is Israel needs to learn to fish, be more self-reliant when it comes to your communication strategy. Let me see how many more pages. Okay, we got one more page. 6, Iran. Israel could do a better job explaining the Iranian threat. Among the many conservatives who support Israel, there is a concern that America could become entangled in a quagmire in Iran. My generation grew up with disasters in Afghanistan and Iraq. That's for sure. We were promised there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, which proved to be a lie. Our generation was also lied to by the governments of Israel and the U.S. that COVID vaccines were safe and effective. Israel intelligence missed the boat on October 7th. But we're asked to trust Israeli intelligence 100% that Iran is on the cusp of obtaining nuclear weapons. Young conservatives are very skeptical of government proclamations. We don't fully trust intelligence assessments. Right now, it seems like Israel is primarily relying on Americans to make the case for attacking Iranian nuclear sites. These arguments get a lot of blowback in MAGA circles. Other than you, Mr. Prime Minister, I see very few Israelis making their case in the media, social media, or podcasts. Many agree with you, myself included, that Iran should not get nuclear weapons. At the same time, I share the concern that America will get sucked into another endless war, costing thousands of Americans' lives. Where are the Israelis who are arguing their case to win over public opinion? Israel should be making its case 24/7 on social media, including long-form English-speaking podcasts and social media channels and websites such as Rapid Response Team and ITN. 7, a paradigm shift is needed in how Israel presents itself to the world, especially on social media. Perhaps the best way to convey my thoughts here is to think of Israel as a political candidate. In this case, a younger woman who grew up on social media. Who is this candidate and what does she stand for? Right now, there's essentially a massive negative ad campaign spreading on social media. These negative ads are defining this candidate. Political campaigns has an abundance of brain power and technological expertise. The question is whether Israel has the willpower to step up its game in this information war. From my vantage point, the status quo is not working. Israel is getting crushed on social media, and you are losing younger generations of America, even among MAGA conservatives. In my opinion, you are losing the information war, which will eventually translate into less political and military support from America. The Holy Land is so important to my life, and it pains me to see our support for Israel slip away. Feel free to contact me on my private number below if you would like to discuss this further. Sincerely, Charlie Kirk. Let's let that sit for a second, chat. I'm going to look at the chat, see what your guys' thoughts are. We're going to talk about what's going on here. Let that stew for a second. No, this letter is definitely real. This letter is absolutely real. The level of detail and knowledge of how to dominate short-form content, this is all Charlie. For those of you that don't know, Charlie was the only conservative that was still on TikTok, so he understood the media game. All the other conservatives were banned on TikTok. Charlie was the only one that was able to build a big following. This is definitely him. Okay, let's talk about this letter. Now, in order for this letter to make sense, I'm going to have to kind of take you guys through and have you guys walk through my shoes a little bit, okay? Let's get into this, all right? July 2024, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I'm at the RNC, right? The Republican National Convention. This was roughly 1 to 2 weeks after Donald Trump had been shot by Matthew Crooks. And when I was there, besides the American flag, I saw a lot of Israeli flags, right? Now, discussion on Israel wasn't really a huge thing. But it's very important for me to note to you guys that while I was at the RNC, I saw a lot of pro-Israel people there. So fast forward to Amfest, okay? At the end of last year, I started to see people at these events that were being a bit more critical of Israel. While I was walking around, several people came up to me. A lot of groypers, by the way. Shout out to you guys. You know, saying, hey, man, you know, we love you. Thank you so much for, you know, having Nick on your show back when it was, you know, still risky to do it, blah, blah, blah. Which, you know, I never regret that. It was always, you know, you guys already know, right? The truth is the truth. You know, getting the truth out is more important than money. You know, I don't regret it whatsoever. But I met a lot of them. Really nice people. And I noticed that there were a lot of these guys at Amfest. I also saw a lot of them at the RNC. But as time progressed, I started to see more and more of them, right? So at Amfest, I met a bunch of people and I saw that there was, some growing criticism of Israel. Now, fast forward to July of 2025. As you guys know, I was at the Turning Point USA event in early July. And not only did I see a lot of Goipers there and a lot of other people, I saw a lot of people that were not so pro-Israel. Mind you, remember guys, Donald Trump got sworn in January 20th. And one of the things that he did when he came into office was he wanted to push back censorship. One of the executive orders he signed was an executive order barring the U.S. government from censoring American citizens. So, U.S. government cannot collude with social media companies to censor American citizens. And alongside this executive order, as well as, all the bullshit that happened to Donald Trump, because Donald Trump himself was a victim of censorship. As you guys remember, right after January 6th, every single platform banned him. But once he became president, we saw all the social media companies start to chill a little bit under censorship. It allowed people that have a dissident voice or a dissenting voice to be able to finally speak without being censored, right? You've seen people that are critical of Israel been able to actually get some limelight. We've been able to break containment, for lack of a better term. And when I was at this event, Charlie had answered some questions. And as usual, whenever he's there answering questions, someone, presses him on Israel. And obviously, Charlie Kirk's been dealing with this for years. Guys coming in, asking him questions about Israel, talking about dancing, etc., USS Liberty, etc. And it's always been entertaining, but it's been far more prevalent than usual. With the recession of censorship, this information that was typically taboo about power and Zionism has been able to come into the forefront. And since this information has been able to come to the forefront, people are getting woken up. This is why they work so hard to get TikTok under control or Israeli control. Because now the Great Awakening is here and you can't put the genie in the bottle. Charlie Kirk, running Turning Point USA, which is an organization designed to convert young people into conservatives, he's on the front lines of this shit. Every single time he throws a Turning Point event and he picks up a mic to do a Q&A, someone is going to grill him on Israel. Before, this was a manageable nuisance because these ideas were considered fringe, nobody really believed it, they would call them a conspiracy theorists, etc. It wasn't really that big of a problem because these were all talking points that weren't mainstream yet. But when I was at the last Turning Point event, now that Trump's been in for about, at that point, 7 months, the questions were flying. And it's very clear that you can see the frustration on Charlie's face. Because let's be very honest and painfully blunt here. Being pro-Israel is a very indefensible position. It's indefensible. Let's just keep it real. We don't get much benefit from them. They wage wars on all their enemies. We pay for it. The Arab world hates us. And now we're actively funding a genocide and losing respect all across the world. Right? No level of Hezbollah is going to pull Israel out of this. However, Netanyahu, Ben-Gvir, Smotrich, and all these other over in Israel, they're not dealing with young Americans every day. They're doing broadcasts from the comfort of Tel Aviv in Hebrew. They're focused on getting rid of Hamas. They're focused on attacking Iran. They don't really care about American youth's growing resentment towards Israel. This is why Jonathan Greenblatt made a big stink about this. Jonathan Greenblatt went to the Knesset, guys, and did a whole presentation on how America's youth are turning their back on Israel and that this is an emergency. Now that the fog of war has dissipated a little bit, Netanyahu's finally realizing, oh shit, damn, I need to start doing interviews. We need to start buying TikTok. We need to start pushing out our propaganda because we're losing the narrative. And Charlie, as being a guy that's on the front lines, talking to young conservatives every single day, this is the number one obstacle that he's dealing with. Years ago, it was a manageable problem. It's a fringe ideology. What are you, a hater? You're an anti-Semite. Get out of here, conspiracy theorists. No worries. Talk about dancing, ignored. USS Liberty, ignored. Larry Silverstein, ignored. Wars in the Middle East, ignored. But now you can't ignore it. Everybody's waking up. And Charlie sees that this is an emergency. He didn't write this letter to Netanyahu out of anywhere because he's on the front lines dealing with this shit. And I saw his face, bro. When I was at Turning Point and I saw him answering these questions, you could see the stress in his face. Now, not only is he getting a lot of pressure from the people that come to his events, he's also getting pressure from his donors. Why? Well, at the last Turning Point event, Charlie Kirk platformed two people, Tucker Carlson and Dave Smith. Dave Smith, for those of you that don't know, is a libertarian comedian, good friend of Joe Rogan's. He's debated on several different shows recently over the past year, and he has a more pro-Palestinian stance, despite the fact that he's Jewish himself. Right? I've had him on my show as well. So he debated a guy named Josh Hammer, if I'm not mistaken, on Israel-Palestine. And then he also had Tucker Carlson. Unless you've been living under a rock, you can make the argument that Tucker Carlson is the biggest conservative in America today. Was formerly on Fox News, has a huge market share of boomer viewers. During Tucker's speech, he was extremely critical of Israel. And during the debate, which Charlie moderated and platformed, Dave Smith obviously was very critical of Israel during the course of his debate. He also had a discussion with Megyn Kelly, who Megyn Kelly has always been a Zionist shill, but due to growing pressure from her audience, she has to take a bit more of a skeptical approach. And her and Charlie had this discussion about the Epstein files, etc. These three things, the discussion with Megyn Kelly, facilitating the debate between Dave Smith and Hammer, and then inviting Tucker Carlson, created a backlash with his donors. So what's going on here? There's multiple things going on. Charlie Kirk, running the biggest youth conservative movement in America, is being pulled on one side that he's not defending Israel enough and being called an anti-Semite for platforming and allowing discourse and debate, but he's also being attacked by his constituents for being an Israel shill every time they ask him questions about Israel. And since Charlie's on the front lines fighting this fight, obviously it's going to affect him a lot harder than Benjamin Netanyahu. So Charlie wrote this letter to kind of wake up the Israeli government that, look, guys, I'm here. You guys don't got the youth. The United States is starting to turn on Israel. If you guys want to continue to exist, you need to get involved here, because these young people now that I'm debating, that are asking me about the USS Liberty, that are asking me about 9/11, these guys are eventually going to become government officials. These guys are eventually going to become legislators. These guys are going to eventually have the power to decide whether we support you or not. This is code red. I see the writing on the wall. Now, he was criticized as being an anti-Semite by his donors, while simultaneously being considered Israel shill by his constituents. Can't win, right? Can't win. So this letter was written out of concern, out of support as well. And the reality is that we are at a very pivotal point in history. I've said this before, I'll say it again. The next 2 years is going to dictate whether Israel continues to exist or not. And with waning U.S. support, that existence is challenged every single day. Because let me be explicitly clear about this. Israel could not exist without U.S. support. If the United States were to pull funding and support from Israel, they would be dominated within a week. They'd be invaded by all their neighbors, and they would be dethroned and trampled on within 7 days, easily. The only reason Israel is able to exist the way that it does and exert the level of power and pressure that it does across all of its neighbors is because of the United States having its back. That is why even when countries respond to Israel, like Iran, they respond in a measured manner to ensure that the United States doesn't attack them as well. So we're at a very big crossroads here. And I think Charlie Kirk recognized that. And he was warning the Israeli government that they need to change course, or else they're going to use the American youth. If you lose the American youth, you got maybe another 20 to 30 years of support, and then you guys are cooked. And he saw this writing on the wall. That's why he wrote this letter. So anyway, give me ones in the chat if you guys agree. Twos if you guys have anything else that maybe if you disagree or you have anything else. So yeah, we'll see what happens, man. But it looks to me, man, that he was deeply pro-Israel up until he passed away. Because this letter was recent, guys. It was as of May. Now, I know a lot of people are saying, oh, yeah, he was starting to wake up or whatever. That's true. I do think that he was starting to wake up, but I still think he was still pro-Israel.